welcome everybody. Let's talk about Revit 2025. And so when Autodesk goes off and looks at how they're going to create new content or update content within their products, they create these things called buckets. And today what we're looking at are the buckets that they did for Revit 2025, where we're dealing with design productivity, we're dealing with sustainability, analyze, interoperability, cloud data, and documentation and efficiency. So if we go narrow down to this, here's all the things, or I shouldn't say all the things, but here are some of the things of design productivity that we have. So starting off with, wrapping the wrapping of the wall content, looking at a bunch of site tools that we have, some Dynamo information, looking at .NET 8 for information. And then when I said not all of it on this page, because there's so many things in design productivity that we had a second page for that. So we're looking at some of the fabrication tools as well. When it comes to analyze, we have the LCS orientation for structural analysis elements. One of my favorites on the interoperability is the ability to import and export step files, and that's a huge change for us and be able to help us work with our manufacturing partners for that. One little thing going on for the cloud data when it comes to monitoring and visualization for coordinating models and changes. And if we pop on over here to sustainability, we've got some Forma add-in updates for us. We have GBXML version 7.03. And then over documentation, we've got a good handful of things when it looks at materials and looks at room perimeters and tagging and dimensioning for components and connectivity. Now, with all of that said in all of those slides, we don't have the time to cover everything in this. So what we're going to concentrate on today is the design productivity and the documentation efficiency. And just as a note for you, we're looking at 60 new features and enhancements in this particular release. So with all that said, here's kind of our agenda for today. We're going to be talking about design productivity for everybody. Then we're going to pass it over to Scott to do the design productivity and documentation for architecture. And then we're going to pass it over to Todd to do the MEP and the structure side of things. And then back to me at the end to do the documentation efficiency, and then wrap it up with Q&A. All right, so looking at the design productivity options for everybody, this is one of my top 5, and I would also say it's probably one of my about time features, that we are now able to have basically a single element or empty element in an array family, giving us the ability to be more flexible when we're doing our family array components. What's a release without Dynamo, right? There's just a whole bunch of things going on here for Dynamo, but things that interested me on this particular one was the Topo solid nodes, as well as the update Revit sample files, which is really helpful for those beginner users that are now starting to dive into that programmability in Revit. In 2024, they changed the game on searching in our project browser, where you can see that the one on the left-hand side was the kind of the old version. If we're looking at Revit 2024, we typed in something to change that and gave us just a listing in the project browser of just those things that we're searching for. But it was really the top level, or what we would call maybe the parent level or the root level. And in 2025, we have the ability now to reach down into the child level to get more information about what we're trying to search for. The filter discipline update, I think it's really just kind of I would say more of a bug fix than a feature, but nonetheless, it's going to help us be a little bit more efficient with our filtering within visibility graphics and so forth. Where a good example of it, when we had in 2024 and below, when we were doing, I just want to see structure, we actually got the auto visual devices in that structure. So there was workarounds that we had to do to get rid of the things that we didn't want to see. And so they've increased that ability for be a little bit more productive within that. And this is another one of those, I call it kind of a gotcha, because I'm going to pick a button and I'm going to expect it to do something or be something, and they change the game on it a little bit. But really what they're doing is they're putting things now up onto the ribbon or into properties. And a good example would be when I pick the scale button, I'm looking for on the options bar, the scale for graphical or numerical, and that's now up on the ribbon. So when you start picking buttons now in 2025, if you don't see it on the options bar, then it's going to be one of two places. It's going to go ahead and be in the ribbon, or it's going to be in the properties palette. All right, so let's take a look at some of those. All right, so I'm going to pop over here to my project browser, and I'll just do a quick search just so you can see the search engine. And so when I just type that in, it's going to show me all of my design options sheets that I have. But when we look at furniture in the past, it would just show me that and wouldn't dive deep into it. For example, it dived deep into this one, but there's also showing me the standard one as well. So it's a better search engine that we have now in our project browsers that can just be huge. Let's go off to my favorite tool so far. It's the array button. So when I'm going to go and grab that array, and I should say array button, it's the array functionality in families. So when I pick on that and I pop over here to my properties palette, I've got a parameter here setting up the number of chairs, and I can type in 12, and that would be a normal thing that is happening here. But if I come down to 1, that was kind of unheard of back in 2024 and below, and even more unheard of is saying I want it to go to 0. Now, a caveat for this that you need to be careful of is if you go to 0 and you don't have another element within that array, it's going to be hard to grab that feature to put it back to something that's usable. So be cautious on that one. Now we go look at the family editor and we look at how that actually looks. Pop over here to my plan view here, get a little closer. When I click onto one of these, it's grabbing that, and there's a formula for that, or a parameter, I should say. And then I look at my parameter information here. If I go off and say, well, I want it to be 2, it'll go off and do 2, and that's pretty normal. And again, in 2024 and below, this is the minimum that we could have. Now, if I go off and I say I want to look at 1, what it's going to do is kind of grade that particular one out. And if I go off to 0, it'll do that as well. And it's graying those out. And the reason why I see them is because down here below, I've got preview visibility off. And if I turn that on, it'll turn those off so I can't see them. All right. Let's go ahead and pop on over to Scott Green, who's going to show us the design productivity and documentation efficiencies in Revit architecture. Off to you, Scott.
Thank you, Eugene. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Scott Green. I'm a senior application expert here at IMAGINiT, and today I will be going over the exciting new design productivity and documentation efficiency features for Revit 2025. Here we go. I'll go ahead and show my screen here. Moving over to creating walls with auto join and lock. In Revit 2025, you can now automatically join or join and lock a newly created architectural wall with an adjacent architectural wall. This new feature will also allow for any inserted elements, such as doors and windows, to perforate. There are some limitations to take into consideration, such as complex cuts will not cut through both the align locked walls. Only simple cuts can cut through. The auto join and lock options are only available while using the architectural walls. These options are not available when modeling structural walls, face-based walls, stack walls, and curtain walls. Newly created slanted walls cannot align with the existing slanted or tapered wall, so the auto join and lock does not work for these scenarios. You can use auto join in this case. Existing adjacent walls modeled in previous Revit versions will not automatically join when upgrading to a new version. Moving over to our demo, I will go ahead and place some architectural walls, making sure that I have one of these options checked first. So I'm going to check auto join and lock. I will go ahead and place a wall. Making sure this is still checked, I'm going to place another wall adjacent to the wall. We can see now that they auto join and lock. So if I select one and move it, they're still joined. If I place a window, it perforates both walls. Another new feature for walls is the in-canvas wall wrapping controls, which allows or disallows the wall-in wrapping conditions with controls in plan views. When wall layer wrapping is enabled for wall ends, the wrapping behavior of each wall end can be changed with the control located near the wall end. The control is only visible when the wall is selected in a plan view. Click the control to change the wrapping behavior of the layers at the wall end. If I go back to my previous demo, we can see if I had selected these walls here, we can see the wrapping controls here. If I go to Edit Type under the Type Properties, we see that these parameters are displayed here, wrapping at inserts and wrapping at ends, with multiple options available for each parameter. Cancel all of that. Another new feature is for curtain walls in Revit 2025. Now, curtain wall mullions can now use profiles with multiple loops. For example, they can use profiles with voided profiles. However, one limitation is that mullion profiles cannot accept open loops. Going into the new massing and site features for site design, to recap, in Revit 2024, we saw the shift from using Topo surfaces to Topo solids. Revit 2025 has reintroduced some support for using legacy Topo surfaces. When working with legacy files containing Topo surfaces and building pads, converting the Topo surface into a Topo solid retains the building pads as excavated areas on the Topo solid. The legacy Topo surfaces and building pads are preserved alongside the Topo solid. You can control its visibility under the topography category. Moving on to the next demo, we have Topo solids by face. Another new site design feature is the ability to create Topo solids on any non-vertical faces of a mass using the Topo solid by face tool. You can inspect the related to mass parameter to verify if the Topo solid is created from a mass or not. The Topo solid made from a model by face is an extrusion. However, this creation method differs from the Topo solid made from sketch import, resulting in limited shape editor functions available for the model by face Topo solid option, especially when the Topo solid is not in a flat planar state. You cannot select faces from different masses for the same Topo solid. For example, if we go here and we go to Massing and Site, Place Mass, I'm going to place a barrel vault here. Staying in Massing and Site, I will go to Model by Face panel, click Topo solid, click on the curvature, select Create Topo solid from multiple selection here under Modify Place Topo solid by Face. And that converts that face into a Topo solid. The next demo will be going over site design excavations on a Topo solid. Revit's new site design tools, we will create an excavation on a Topo solid using a floor. This new feature will allow the use of a floor, roof, or another Topo solid as cutting elements to excavate a Topo solid. The volume reported by the host Topo solid is adjusted as the element is excavated by other elements. Remove the excavation to fill the excavated volume. The element used to excavate, such as the floor, will remain in the model. You can use the legacy pads as a cutter geometry to excavate a Topo solid. There are cases that the excavate tool will fail due to any sharp triangulation facets existing near the cutter element, or the point is located on the edge of the cutter element. Users can adjust the topo point height to avoid those sharp edges, or adjust the cutter boundary. This is a known geometry limitation and tech difficulties to the Boolean operation. I'll go over and back to the demo here. I have a Topo solid here. I'm going to go ahead and place a floor. We can ignore that warning. Going back to Massing and Site, I will select the Topo solid. I will select under TopoSolid Shaping the Excavate tool, and I will find the boundary of the floor and click on it, and thereby creating an excavation from the floor. In the last slide, I mentioned that excavations will have their volumes calculated. A new feature for site design allows the use of excavation parameters to know the exact amount of soil removed by Boolean operations by other elements. We introduced two new parameters, the individual excavation volume, leading to the dialog that shows all the cutter elements that cut the TopoSolid, and the total excavation volume, showing how much soil has been taken out of this TopoSolid instance. You can also create schedules for those parameters, use schedule filters to display volumes by TopoSolid types, use multi-category schedules with filters to display all elements cutting a TopoSolid instance. We also see improvements for shafts placed through TopoSolids. In previous versions, shaft openings would cut through the entire TopoSolid element. Now the bottom of the shaft is respected as the depth limit of the cutoff. Note that the cutoff volume by a shaft is not tracked in schedules. Use a floor, roof, or mass excavation instead. In previous years, face-based families could not recognize the faces created from Boolean operations. In Revit 2025, the exposed Boolean surfaces of a cut TopoSolid are now able to host other elements. Site components will recognize the exposed face as a TopoSolid. If we go back to the previous demo, if I happen to place a component such as a tree on that excavation, I can select the tree, pick a new host, pick the TopoSolid, select the tree, and see that the host is now the TopoSolid. Site design tools have also seen some graphical improvements in 2025. The smooth display of TopoSolid elements removes the triangulated appearance of the surface in your model at a project level. Enable the TopoSolid Smooth Shading option in the Site panel dropdown. Smooth shading is visible in views using shaded, consistent colors, textures, and realistic visual styles. The smooth appearance is maintained when you print and export if enabled. There are, however, some limitations, such as surface patterns of TopoSolids will not display when TopoSolid Smooth Shading is enabled. You cannot place decals on a smooth TopoSolid. Material displays cannot be overridden with paint or other graphic overrides. And if the TopoSolid is a RVT file linked into the host, users have to smooth it in the original RVT file, then reload it into the host to see the smoothness shading in the host file. Another graphical improvement is the enablement of display contour lines in slab-shaped editor mode, if they are visible in the view. Previously, no contours could be seen from the TopoSolid editing mode. The contour displays responds to visibility graphic overrides and the contour setting in TopoSolid type properties. Lastly, with the introduction of shape editing snaps, we can now enable or disable the snapping to internal points and edges when in shape editing mode. This option is available when editing floors, roofs, and TopoSolids. This option is cleared by default, meaning the internal points and edges will be ignored. The current snap behavior in the along surface and absolute only capture the XY position of a reference geometry. The new snap XYZ snaps to the Z coordinate of any visible geometry, including DWGs and Revit links. Limitations. Snapping cannot detect points of a spline line. Ensure that the view range is set to display the entire reference object in that scenario. The snap sequence prioritizes the midpoint and endpoint. When snapping to a loadable family, switch to a 3D view to ensure that you snap to the appropriate point. Moving on to documentation efficiency, For the material library, 2 new features for managing materials are batch delete and a thumbnail generation improvement. For batch deletion of materials in the materials library, we can now manage multiple project materials simply by selecting them and right-clicking to choose between deleting them from your model or adding them to a custom library. With the new material thumbnail generator, when working on the Appearance tab of the Material browser, utilize the drop-down menu next to the material thumbnail to configure the rendering settings for the thumbnail image. The newly added Quick Rendering setting expedites the generation of a thumbnail image when changing your material selection. The new thumbnail render setting is faster and consumes fewer CPU resources. For my next demo, I'll be going over room parameter accuracy improvements. We will cover the room parameter accuracy improvement. This new method used to calculate room parameter values has been updated in Revit 2025, resulting in improved accuracy by accounting for inner loops within rooms, in addition to enhancements for calculating the perimeter of round rooms or rooms with arc segments. Users may notice changes in room perimeters when a project is upgraded to 2025. Switching now over to the demo, we have a room with 2 arc segments here and a perimeter value. Note that with your room tag, you will have to include a parameter to calculate for perimeter. I'll go ahead and place a new set of walls with an inner loop. I will place a room here using the room tag with a perimeter parameter. We see that the value says that is 5,304 square feet with a perimeter of 363 feet. Now, if I select the loop and I delete it, this perimeter now changes to 303 feet 4 inches. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to now pass this over to Todd, and he will cover structure and MEP.
Thank you, Scott. That was great. So I'm Todd Benning. I'm a solution consultant with IMAGINiT, and I want to take this opportunity to take a few minutes and discuss some of the MEP portion, MEP improvements, and after that I will discuss the structural improvements. So to begin, one of the things that we've been, something that's been around for ages, is that anytime we dropped an object that had an instance or a mark parameter, it always put a number in there, whether we wanted it or not. Now you can see a list there with many of the mechanical families now will not include a mark number by default. It won't do anything for the numbers that are already in there. If you're upgrading a file or anything like that, those numbers will still be there, but any new products or any new content you put in there, the mark number will be empty. Also, introduction of the single phase within a 3-phase system. So I'll show you an example of how to have a single phase component inside of a 3-phase environment. Then there is also on the data panels and some other panels, we have the ability to set the maximum circuits that can be allowed within that particular panel. And so we'll discuss that. Plus, we're going to show you some changes to some of the parameter names that are listed in our electrical properties. And also maybe even there's another parameter I'm going to show you where things have been relocated to a different part of the properties. So I'll show that in a minute. Okay, so and then the introduction of including panel like voltage, including into our things like our data, and being able to have them being calculated against our electrical loads in our building. And so we can now use things like data switches and voice systems, and they can also be calculated against the
power within our building. So I'll show that. All right. And then we can also now include in our schedules or possibly in our filters the duct and pipe pressure drop data. So if you want to either visualize it or see it within a schedule, we can actually include that with the analytical duct pipe segments properties. We'll show you that. All right, so let me get out of this real quick and let's jump into Revit. Oh, so here I am. One of the first things I wanted to show was just that the idea of adding a new element, whether it be a light or air terminal, other types of devices. When you add it onto your drawings and you add it, you will see that any new elements you add under our properties, if I go down here to mark, the mark is empty, where the previous one that was already there still had a number in it. And so that's the first thing. The next thing I wanted to look at is the introduction of the, and go over here, take this PV battery cabinet. And looking at the properties of it, and I'm going to go into the edit type. This is where I can establish the number of poles. So here I can decide, if it's going to be a one faces there, and the let me get that. Yeah, and so being able to identify the number of phases that you could have into a project, and you can have that built into the family already. And so by just coming over to the properties and hitting edit type. The other one I wanted to discuss and show you was, I'm going to come over here and grab a big old transformer here, is that the relocation of, I scroll down here, normally right about here, I think right about electrical circuiting, you would see the distribution, secondary or one of the distributions. They have actually relocated it down to where they're both now put near each other. I remember many times going through and finding one and forgetting I had to scroll up to the other top of the properties to get to the other. Now you can see that they're now closely sitting right next to each other. It's perfect, exactly where I need them to be. All right, and then we take a look at coming over here to our lighting plan again, and I'm going to come over here and take a look. Whoop. Excuse me. Okay, so here I am. I've got a data device here, and I can, if I have another data device here, I think it's right here. I've already created a circuit. You can see that, and if I look at my list of my systems here, I've got a data circuit here. Currently, there's no panel associated with it, and so I'm going to go ahead and add. I'm going to go ahead and select the panel that goes with it. I just have it sitting here for now, and you'll see that now I have a data circuit with an associated panel. But now I can take that same panel and I can then circuit it up to a distribution center. And so that's the point, is that you can start to build on these more low voltage type systems and bring them into your total summary. All right, so that is the side of the MEP productivity, but there's and let's see, one other thing here I want to show you. And that was the being able to calculate now I'm going to show you a schedule here. Come down here to my analytical duct segment schedule, and within that you now have a property under our fields to get the pressure drop. And so you'll see I have two different, I have the parameter for pressure drop, so I can add that into my schedule. So even with the analytical layout, I can also start calculating my pressure drop. Okay, so that it will conclude my MEP portion, and so I'm not going to go ahead and switch over to discussing the structural side of things. So let me come out here. With structural, we've long since been able to put rebar into our projects, but now we have a splicing tool that is parametric. It gives us great ability to define exactly where we want to splice our drawings, our rebar, and on different types of methods, either by picking a specific line or possibly a length. I'll demonstrate that in a minute. There's also the ability to, in your filters, if you want to be able to give some visual feedback, you can set up a filter that will help you visualize whenever you have an excessive amount of bar length. So there's a new parameter called maximum bar length. We'll go through that and demonstrate that in a minute. Then there is the rebar, the constraints. So if you have a rebar that is constrained to an object, but you need to change the size of that object, but you need to keep that rebar exactly how it was issued, you can now disable the rebar so that if the object were to change in size, that it would the rebar will stay as it was originally designed. And okay, splitting. We've enhanced the splitting feature within columns and framing. They've included the split, plus also split with gap. Many of us may know the split with gap command from mainly the architectural side of things. When we would split a wall, we'd add a little gap. We introduced also that gap with MEP a few years ago, and now we see that with our structural. So we'll be demonstrating that in a minute. And then an enhancement to the connection automation. So within using that the script, you have a new pull down that you will use to help you identify which connection you'd like to choose and use for the different elements. And that leads me to my demo. So let me jump out of here. So I'm going to start here with the, let's go to my cancel. All right. All right, so here I am. I'm going to actually come down here to my my structural reinforcement plan here. So as you can see, I've got a slab here, and I've got various rebar segments. Some are part of a set, other parts are individual, and I'll kind of demonstrate the difference between them. So to start with, let's start with this first one here. With selecting this rebar set, you'll see the word or the command here for splice rebar. And if I click on that, I have the choice now with these three choices to pick by specific, like a line. So if I were to come over here and pick a grid line, it will, as you can see, it will splice the rebar. If I keep going and add another one, and even if I have a, let me finish that, and I were to do anything, like if I had a grid line or possibly a just a detail line, or a model line or a reference plane, anything that you can click on to be a straight edge, you can use that as a splitting place. So I can come over here and I'll click on that, and you'll see it's split. Once these are split, you have the ability to modify them. So if you need, there are parametrics. So if I were to shift my line, and let me get out, sorry, I should finish that. Let me get out of there and move my line. the parametric feature will adapt itself when I get back into it. So let me get out of that. So being able to have a parametric piece to where if you make adjustments to it, then you can you can remove it also by just touching it. If I came back here and touched it again, you'll see that I removed the split. And the other thing that's important to understand about the types of splits, the couplers, is that they have different values. So if I were to look, you have different types of splitting based on different properties. So if I come over here to this particular one, you'll see shift bars by plane, and you can add a multiplier to it and a lap length multiplier. So if you need to make any adjustments to the different types of couplers you need to use, you can choose from the different choices they've got here. Or make some of your own. Here's another one where it's a 1.3 modifier and a lap length of 60. All right. So that was the method of picking a line. Let's go ahead and talk about ones where we pick it based off of length. So I'll go ahead and choose this guy, and we'll do the space bar. And this time we'll do it by length. And right now I have it set to 40 with a minimum of 3 feet. And so when I come down here, you'll see, now you can see where my line is going in this vertically. And if I hold down my space bar, it'll flip it to the other side, so you can choose which direction you want to start it from. If you are doing ones that are not part of a set, down here you'll see that it becomes an individual selection instead of a group selection. So there's a difference between if you're having them all set individually, you're going to have to pick them individually. So if I go ahead and select that, I now have them split based off of a certain length. The other thing I wanted you to be aware of beyond just splitting was the visual filters that help you know when you've got a bar that's too long. So I'll go ahead and into our visibility graphics and go to filters. I'm going to create a new filter, and I'll give it a name. I'll call this max, just keep it simple. We'll call it max bar length. Yeah, and then I'll go ahead and choose my rebar. Oh, where'd it go? There, sorry, it's down here. There we go. Yeah. So now that I've got that selected, now I have the parameters to choose from, and I've got down here in the M's, I've got the max bar length, and if I set that to be greater than say 40 feet, then I have this set up. So let's go ahead and test that out. And then I'll add it to this view, and max bar length. And now I'll go ahead and use that to customize the visual look to that filter. I'll go ahead and just change the color of it to something noticeable, and click OK. And click OK, and you'll see very quickly, you know exactly which bars have got an excessive length to them. All right, couple more things to cover here. I'm going to jump over here to let's do my split. So we talked about doing like if I wanted to do a vertical split, I can use the modify split command and split the bar, the column, and now it's split. And so it's very helpful. It helps me break things up a little easier. Which also leads me into discussing the enhancement to the components. You wanted the bar structural connectors. So obviously we've got, I can do it manually because it's just a one-off. That's pretty easy to do. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and demonstrate the structural connection automation. And I'll go ahead and once it pulls up here, I'll go down to where my columns are. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and choose my column end-to-end splice joint and run it. And now I just need to select what it is I'm going to have the computer analyze. So I'll go ahead and select, and we'll pick both those columns. Once they've been selected, this is where things have gotten a little, the enhancement to what type of connector you choose. So you've got, you have to have them preloaded in order to use them, but once they're preloaded, they'll show up on the list. So I'm going to come down here and pick my splice joint. And once I've got that all done, I'm ready to run the program, and it will place my connector. And that'll apply pretty much anywhere you're going to be using that connector. You just have those connectors loaded so that when you run it, you can choose the appropriate one for what you're selecting. All right, a couple more things here. I'm going to jump over here to detail 0. And this enhancement for, now I'm going to actually jump back over here to my, my demo, the second half of this structural. All right. So that's the productivity portion of structural. Now we're going to talk about the documentation side of things. And so the first one here is schematic bending details for rebar tagging. So when we go to tag rebar, there's an enhanced display of bar bending information. And you can actually, there's a couple different choices to play with that you can use that will be a part of a tag. And we'll go through that. Okay, and then some enhancements to the bending details you create, the ability to manipulate, move, and adjust the dimensions and the text that go with it. And then the last one here is the ability to disassemble a connector into its individual parts. In the past, it would kind of break apart your dimensioning, your tagging. Now it will maintain its consistency. So let me do these real quick. All right, so I'm gonna come over here and grab this rebar here. And up here, you'll see the bending detail. When I click on it, I get two choices. I get one's called realistic, which this is what it looks like. It's kind of makes it about as realistic as it can. And or I can do let's do this again with bending detail, and I do one as schematic. And I click on that. Let's go ahead and push this down here. Now, ones, obviously, they're quite a bit size difference. It's just about one is designed to show up on a screen. This one's designed to be accurate in size. Now, I mentioned to you that you can make adjustments to the text that's in here. When I hover and hit tab, I can select the individual piece of text and I can move them if they need to be adjusted and to make things a little readable. You can pull this around, hit tab, select a piece here. You also can go into the properties and you can do a lot more fine tuning of exactly the type of dimensioning, the type of font, the type of text, what text you're using, the size of your text, and in dimension offsets. So there's a lot of things you could look through here. Be familiar with what some of these options are would be really helpful. And one of the okay, and then all right. So I think, and one last one. I think we're gonna have to move on here, but I think that's enough for now. Like I said, we got a lot to cover, but boy, a lot to put into an hour. So I hope you got some useful out of the things I've shown, and I will turn this back over to Eugene.
Thank you, Todd, and Scott, great presentation. So I'm going to wrap this presentation up with the general documentation and efficiencies. And I really just have one little tool that I want to show for you folks, and it's called sheet collections. We now have the ability to easily group our sheets into what we call collections now. And we also have the ability to have sheets, multiple sheets with the same number. Let me restate that again. Allow duplicate sheet numbers across collections. So that's a game changer for a lot of you folks out there that are trying to have that multiple sheets with that same number. But we're not done yet. And this is a 2-pager PowerPoint presentation where we have the ability to also filter our sheets where we're doing schedules, or we can do it filtering by printing and exporting as well. There's 2 new parameters that we have the ability to use as well, and giving us the ability to deliver better projects faster and cleaner organizations with our sheet collector. So with all that said and done, I'm going to go ahead and just do my little presentation on it. So I'm going to start off with just how do we create this. So I'm going to go to my sheets and all sheets. I'm going to right click it, and there is a new sheet collection option for that. Won't worry about that. And then we can rename it a couple places. That's why I have my properties palette up here as well. But you know, you can do a typical right click rename. And let's go ahead and get this in here. And I don't care if I misspell anything for the presentation. All right, so now I got it. Now what do? I bring sheets into it. And a couple different ways to do that. I can grab this one and I can drag it up into it. And now we have it up in there. We could also grab multiple ones as a group and we can drag it up, or we can come over here to properties and grab it from the list there. And you can see now that we have my collections, I'm able to just kind of open it up and close it, and you can see they're all kind of there. Now, when I go off and let's say I want to create a new sheet, we'll use the B. There's my new sheet. It kind of fell into there because I wasn't in my collections. So if I right click on my collections, let's say new sheet, and B, there we go. And you'll see I have a new sheet there. And now if I renumber that, let's say that I want to change that to be, let's say 905. I'm going to I'll get a typical error message saying, yeah, you can't do that. And the reason I can't do that is simply because I have a 905 in my collections. And so if I go back here and I renumber it again and say 100, now I have a 100 in my collections, and I have a 100 down in my all sheets. And if I go off and I say I want to create another collections, and within that new collections here, I want to do another new sheet. And I renamed that one to A-100. You can see that we can have that numbering system all over the place now with our collections. And then taking it a step further, we can go off and say, I want to do a sheet list. So I want to go off and say sheet list here. I'll scroll down to the bottom and I'm going to grab my collections. I'm going to grab my number and my name. We'll say okay to that. So you can see all the sheets that we have in our project. You can see the different collections down there. There we go. And then I can filter it. So if I pop over here to my filter, go to edit and say that I want to filter based collections equal to, you can see the different ones there. I want to go and grab my design option one. And now I actually have a schedule based upon my sheet collections. And now I maybe want to print that out or export that out. So I can go over here to my export option. You can see there's PDF here and PDF here. Oops, went too quickly on that. And I want to go print to PDF. And then we have our little button right here, a little edit button under our view, select view sheets. And then under multiple, you have your collections that you can choose from. And then lastly, on this particular one, we now have the ability to export or print PDFs in the background. So as Todd said, we've covered a whole bunch of stuff today. Anything in black is on my top 5 categories that we're seeing. Things we obviously didn't get into, a lot of the stuff like the fabrication pieces we didn't get into that are, you know, kind of game changers for that. We didn't get into, unfortunately, the analysis for the carbon print. Those are kind of my features as well. And a lot of the documentation pieces as well. So looking at this, we just have a lot of new tools moving forward in 2025.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks everyone.
Cheers.